For the very latest, let's bring in Sunday Times Asia correspondent Philip Sherwell. Philip, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, we're seeing grim and graphic videos coming out of towns and cities across Myanmar, and the people I've managed to get through on the ground are who are in contact with protesters are reporting really sort of battle zone-like conditions in several places. As you say, there are reports of at least 12 dead, but it could be significantly more. As well as these images of people who've been clearly shot dead with live bullets, which we're seeing. There's also been footage of, for example, voluntary medics being ruthlessly beaten up by security forces and their ambulance being shot up. So the feeling is very much that the security forces are now going in sort of hell for leather. And across these towns, and particularly in areas in Yangon, but in other locations too, the protesters are trying to sort of claim sort of safe zones. They're putting up barricades. When the security forces come in, they sort of retreat. So there's a cat and mouse element to this. But there's obviously, there's talk of battlefields, but there's only one side that's got the weapons, and that is the security forces. But the protesters are undaunted and they're unfazed, and they insist they're going to come back on the streets. And when there are more casualties, they're treated as martyrs for the cause. We see shrines popping up. We see emotional tributes. This is only really galvanizing people. And these are mainly young people who are actually out there on the streets in these confrontations, but other generations are taking part in the civil disobedience movement, the strikes. So you have a sort of concerted effort here to sort of stand up to the military despite this crackdown.
Indeed. The situation, though, is getting worse. As we were just saying earlier, we're seeing more and more bloodshed there in Myanmar. Has this provoked any greater reaction from the international community?
Well, there's going to be another meeting of the Security Council on Friday. That's been called specifically to debate the situation on Myanmar. And from what I understand from some diplomatic sources I've been talking to, there is increasing feeling certainly in Western capitals that sanctions from their part are going to have to be stepped up. There's always been a debate about sanctions. There's support for targeted sanctions. There's widespread support for targeted sanctions on military leaders and on military-run companies. But there's been concern about broader sanctions that might hit the whole economy. Well, the people of Myanmar are taking this into their own hands now, and they're on strike anyway. The economy, part of the goal of the civil disobedience movement is to really bring parts of the economy to a halt to prevent the junta being able to control the country. So there's a feeling amongst people on the ground that they would like to see many of them would like to see much broader sanctions. And this concern that, are you hitting the poor of Myanmar is kind of overtaken by the immediacy of the need to protest. They fear that if the momentum fades, that, the junta will just become a fait accompli. The Southeast Asian nations met yesterday and issued a very weak sort of statement that urged restraint on all sides, as though all sides were guilty of not showing restraint, and didn't even call for the release of detainees such as Aung San Suu Kyi. So they are hoping that European nations, the US, Australia, will sort of start coming in with much tougher and harder sanctions. I think those governments are going to find it increasingly untenable with these sorts of images coming out of Myanmar to not launch take some sort of action.
Philip, thank you for your reporting. That's Philip Sherwell there, the reporter from the Sunday Times.